Hi, my name is Lee Patterson. Welcome to my presentation discussing the history of art education in America. My presentation will first provide a historical timeline of art education in America. After that, I will highlight three key figures who encouraged art education reform. Finally, I'll present an art pedagogy I plan to implement as a future art instructor. Art was first introduced in public schools in the 1800s as part of the science curriculum. It focused on mechanical drawing with the thought it would promote engineering and contribute to economic growth. Art was perceived less as a form of personal expression than as a way to boost the economy. Then, starting in the 1920s, the philosopher, psychologist, and education reformer John Dewey developed theories that led to a child-centered approach to teaching art. Art education shifted away from a focus on the needs of society to those of the child. A child-centered theory of art education continued into the early 1950s. Psychologist Victor Lowenfeld, a proponent of Dewey's approach, devised additional theories about the importance of art education to child development. In the late 1950s, around the time the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth, art education shifted back to basics, a focus on society's needs rather than those of the children. It was the beginning of an era of structured, discipline-based art education. This orientation continued until the early 1990s, when art education combined a child-centered approach with discipline-based standards. This balanced approach was formalized with the implementation of the National Visual Art Education Standards in 1994. The standards sought to provide K-12 students with a uniform type of art education. The National Visual Art Education Standards, which were updated in 2014, continue to guide art education in America. The three historical advocates of art education I would like to highlight are Rembrandt Peale, John Dewey, and Elliot Eisner. Each was a progressive reformer convinced of the importance of art education. Rembrandt Peale, who was born during the Revolutionary War, was an artist from Philadelphia, known widely for his paintings of President George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. He was passionate about art and in 1812 opened the Peale Museum in Baltimore to provide art education to the public. This was the period when art education was thought of as a science, and Peale contributed by developing the art curriculum at Philadelphia's Central High School to include perspective, mechanical drawing, and calligraphy. His book, Graphics, was used to teach drawing techniques and writing skills. John Dewey was born just before the Civil War. He believed that art education would encourage children to become critical thinkers and problem solvers. He developed what became known as the child-centered approach to art education. It led educators to focus on the specific needs of the child. Dewey encouraged educators to engage their students by incorporating social, emotional, and cultural elements in the curriculum. Dewey's theory encouraged children to explore, experiment, and collaborate when doing art. This approach highlighted the creative process. Elliot Eisner, who was born during the 1930s Great Depression, was an art professor at Stanford University. Like Dewey, Elliot Eisner believed that art education fostered child development. Nevertheless, he was concerned that art education lacked standards and that a more structured approach to teaching art would enrich students' learning experience. He developed a discipline-based approach to teaching art centered on four principles: art production, critique, aesthetics, and art history. He differed from Dewey by incorporating cognitive elements such as art history and criticism in art education to get students to think critically about art and its place in society. As the philosophies of these three reformers indicate, art education has changed significantly over time, resulting in the art education standards practiced today, which includes both discipline-based and child-centered approaches. A pedagogy in art education that I admire is the constructivist approach to teaching art. The constructivist pedagogy is focused on the creative process in meeting the individual needs of the student. This teaching method engages students in hands-on activities and projects. This approach encourages students to explore and experiment with different materials, which promotes skills like problem solving and critical thinking. This method encourages educators to ask questions, leaving room for student interpretation and self-expression. As someone interested in teaching elementary age children, I chose the constructivist pedagogy because it aligns well with the general goals of early and mid-child education. When doing art with my children, who are 5 and 9 years old, I naturally apply the constructivist approach when guiding them through a project. It's revealing to see their level of engagement as they think critically and creatively. I look forward to watching my future students go through the same experience as they learn and grow as individuals and artists. One way that I will implement the constructivist style of teaching is by encouraging students to focus on the process of creating, allowing them to experiment and explore with different mediums. I will also incorporate themed projects that are relevant to their lives and promote self-expression. Thank you for taking the time to view my presentation.